Hey, we're live. Hey, welcome, whoever's here already. We're gonna go ahead and jump right in. I am Michelle Teheux. I write Untrickled, and at least in my view, right underneath me is Allison Tate. I'll let you introduce yourself.
And I'm Allison Tate, and I write Inheriting Inequality. So, about all of the different things that we inherit and how the things that we inherit create various forms of inequality. And that has a lot to do with today's topic, which is the care economy. So, we're going to talk about unpaid labor. We're going to talk about obviously work in the home. We're going to talk about care work, child care, elder care, but also community building and how and why all of this is gendered and the impacts that it has for women's wealth, how this creates women's wealth gaps and gender wealth gaps and other kinds of wealth gaps, and how it creates inequality. So, I thought, do you want to start off? We've said this was about unpaid labor and the care economy. Anything that you want to start off with, Michelle, about unpaid labor that you do, or something that
Unpaid labor is my favorite kind.
yeah.
Um, I've done a lot of unpaid labor in my life, and a lot of it was voluntary. Um, of course, the years I was home with my young children are the obvious thing, but community involvement and I was at a Rotary Club meeting yesterday and accepting some money for a literacy organization. And it really struck me. The lady who was there presenting with me, she's way more involved in the community than I am. And when she starts talking about all the different programs she's involved in, many of them, but not all of them literacy related, I was just blown away. I'm like, this woman essentially, she's a little older than me. She mentioned that she graduated from high school in 1976. So that's how I know.
Mm.
And she's taken care of an awful lot in the community. Of course, all or none of it is paid, or all of basically it's all unpaid. And if she were to just stop doing it, who would step in? Probably another woman. But women have traditionally been the people who have kept the home going, taken care of all the family stuff. They decorate for Christmas, they make Thanksgiving dinner, they remember everybody's birthdays. And a lot of us actually, are okay with this. We're happy to do these things, but we would like to have some help. And we don't always get that help. And the other problem with it is if you are being very, very busy taking care of everybody else, it would be nice if other people had your back, but that is not always the case. We
Mhm.
have talked before about a woman who devotes her life to doing a lot of work at home and in the community. And then if her husband leaves her or something tragic happens to him, there she is without job skills or pay or a way to support herself. So it's kind of dangerous when you put yourself last and everybody first. That's kind of been like a traditional feminine virtue, but it can really come back to bite you in the back.
Yeah, unpaid labor certainly, all of the statistics about unpaid labor, there are huge impacts on just the wealth that women are able to accumulate, but the effects also, as you point out, are definitely mental and psychological and emotional, and just, feeling burnout, feeling more depression, feeling like, as you said, uncared for. I think there are so many different results of unpaid labor and the way that it gets gendered. And I think it's interesting because, we all do unpaid labor, right? Like, we all you're married, I'm single, but, I do unpaid labor even though I don't have, direct caretaking responsibilities. I do unpaid labor when I make myself dinner and I go and I, do my laundry, or I take my laundry somewhere, or whatever I do, I do unpaid labor. Everyone does. The problem is when unpaid labor, when you're doing it constantly for other people, right? And when it's
Mhm.
unfair and the work is distributed unequally, right? So I do think, it's not that unpaid labor is always bad. It's
No, it's
that
not always
unpaid labor
bad.
can be distributed unequally, and that becomes harmful, right? It becomes harmful to the groups who take the disproportionate burden of the unpaid labor, and it's usually women, or again, people, if you look at same-sex marriages, people who are the spouse who's coded as feminine or who's feminized in the marriage. So it's really who takes on these roles and the disproportionate harm that falls to people for taking on unpaid labor.
I think our communities are a lot better when we have people volunteering in the schools, volunteering to put together your community festival, planning neighborhood block parties, setting up literacy organizations, doing fund drives for whatever cause. I mean, these are all good things that makes life better for everybody. And I'm not going to say that only women do this, but I look around and it's mostly women doing most of this, and that time comes from somewhere. Does
Mhm.
it come from her leisure? Does it come from time that she could have been working on a career? Does it come from time she could have been with her children? Does it come from time she could have been reading a book or watching trash TV or whatever it is she likes to do? I mean, when they say everybody has the same 24 hours in a day, that's actually not true
Right.
because some people are just really, really busy and,
Mhm.
I don't think very many people do nothing, but it's worth maybe looking around your own little bubble and asking yourself, am I doing things for other people who are capable of doing them for themselves?
Mhm.
And is this routine? I mean, it's one thing if your spouse is going through a a tough time, then yes, you pick up a little bit more and you don't charge them for it. But are you routinely doing all the stuff and your spouse isn't?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Or
about patterns, right? It's about
yeah,
pattern, disproportionate burden, and one of the Michael just said, which is absolutely true. Another problem is this isn't reflected in the economic data, right, that people use to make decisions, which is absolutely true. Family sending kids to daycare is reflected in GDP, but a mom staying at home is not reflected in GDP.
yeah.
It's totally true. And I was just looking, and this was globally, but I think this was from Oxfam. Women globally perform at least 2.5 times more unpaid household and care work than men, totaling 16 billion hours. And they talk about the invisible labor, cooking, cleaning, caring for children. So again, to Michael's point, right? Like who performs the child care. All of that work is valued over $10 trillion annually, and that's globally, sustaining economies and yet often excluding women from paid employment and limiting their financial independence. So it's neither reflected in the GDP nor is it reflected in women's wealth because they're not only uh, taking fewer opportunities to earn wealth, but they're not actually earning wealth for the for care work that they're doing.
I've noted probably way too many times in my writing that even though I was happy to stay home with my children and I enjoyed it, I think it was good for them and I would do it again. I'm paying a really high price now, as a woman of my age who took quite a few years out of the workforce. I did not anticipate at that point that I was going to get divorced. And it turns out you can think you're never going to get divorced and still get divorced. That's
Turns
my
out, yeah, turns out to be true.
yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, I I'm in my 2nd marriage. This is not my 1st marriage, but, I would have bet in fact, I did bet everything that my 1st marriage was secure, and it turns out that I wasn't correct. But, I honestly I honestly was not worried about the financial consequences because I like, it'll be fine, you know?
Yeah, so this is interesting. So I tend to blame marriage for a lot of things.
And that's fair.
I'm a law professor, and so I tend to blame the legal construct of marriage, right? The way that marriage works legally as a huge problem because it creates different incentives for people. Like
Mhm.
you said, it creates incentives for people to specialize labor and one person to stay at home and one person to go out in the world and earn sort of like the separate spheres mentality. And it's usually, again, the woman or the person who usually earns less because of right labor market discrimination stays at home. And then that compounds. Like you said, you earn less and then you keep earning less and you forego earning opportunities. And then if you want to get back in the paid labor market, it's very hard to do. So I tend to think of marriage as one of the major problems in terms of unpaid labor. And it's really like a legal structure that captures people's labor. So sort of like the nuclear family is a structure that captures female labor. Um, but it's interesting because I was thinking, again, I'm not married. I've never been married and have no plans to ever get married. Um, but even single people, right? There's a burden of care when I think of parents, right? And you think of elder care. So it's not just the family in terms of marriage. It's not just the nuclear family, but there's also a burden on single people for elder care, which is becoming more and more important and more frequent that people are engaging in elder care and women are engaging in
Yeah.
elder
Yes, and, it's occurred to
care.
me.
So you said marriage. Do you think if you hadn't been married to your first husband, would you have provided the same childcare?
um Well, you have to also think about marriage has some legal protections too, as far as what you're, entitled to.
It does.
So I'm not sure I don't think I would have been better off being not married to him, but I would have been better off if, number 1, if I had given any thought at all to the fact that just because you think you're never gonna get divorced does not mean I honestly didn't think that it could happen if you married a reasonable person, which I thought I had, and you went into it, you didn't rush into it, you were very thoughtful about it, blah, 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 and you did your best to be a good spouse. I thought that, you know, that would work out, and you can do everything as right as possible, and that's still not a guarantee, and
Right.
I would not have believed this if someone had told this to me when I was in my 20s, but it turns out to be a fact.
Yeah.
And, but the other thing is that, it also did not occur to me, and we could not have done this even if it had occurred to me because we were living so close to the bone in those first years when the kids were little, but, uh, I really should have gotten a much bigger portion of his pension and things like, because he was a teacher, so he actually had one, has but yes, I definitely should have been entitled to a little bit more of that money, and in families where there is some kind of, decent amount of money coming in, the woman or whoever the caregiver is, but I'm gonna say woman, there should be money put into her retirement account every month from his job or vice versa,
Yep.
so that, if things don't work out, you have what you would have had you been working that entire time. That's something that never would have thought I never would have thought of that in the '90s. I don't think
Yeah.
I'd never heard that idea in the '90s. But
Yes, it's interesting. So, like, if you look, I mean, I was just reading a book recently, a sort of a history of feminist movement in 1970s and things that they were trying to try that women in the social movement were trying to play around with in terms of policy solutions to help protect women who chose within a marriage to again specialize labor and raise the children and do the domestic work. And one of them was housewife insurance.
oh,
So
that would have been
creation
a
of
great
some kind
idea.
of divorce insurance, which, is what equitable distribution was supposed to be, but I like the concept. I mean, obviously it would be, gender neutral, but I mean, it is again mostly women. So housewife insurance, but also just fair compensation for the labor, right? Like
Yeah.
if what would it look like to get paid to do that work? Right? I mean,
Well, it occurs to me that if you go back in time a little bit, which is something I tend to do this a lot. I like to compare one time with another. So if you go back in time, uh, let's say any time before people got paid work, because if you go back in time, nobody got paid work, right? You had you had your hunting, you had your gathering,
mm,
basically. If
you
we're
got
gonna
yeah, you get paid through, right? You got paid
yeah.
in kind. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can everybody contributed. If the man went off and killed a wildebeest, he didn't come back and demand money for it, and she didn't demand money for having, made clothing or whatever. And then you can kinda trace that through different societies at different times, what gendered work there was, and at a time when women basically were pregnant and or breastfeeding for a great period of their life, you were gonna stick fairly close to home. It doesn't mean they didn't work, they did work, but it wasn't, leaving your children work most of the time. It was take have a baby strapped to your hip and go out into the woods to gather nuts or whatever. But everybody was always working. You didn't have, anybody who wasn't working unless they were too young or too old. But at some point, men started leaving the house, going out, obtaining money, and coming back, and women were just staying home and depending on exactly which time period, this varies a lot, but maybe they were earning a little bit of money by butter and eggs or textile work or whatever, or maybe they weren't. Maybe they were just having a ton of kids and just, gardening and taking care of the home stuff, which was still plenty of work. But from the time that since women's work has never really been traditional women's work was never really she never really got money for it, but when men left the house and got money for it, that from then on, we were just kinda screwed, and we're still trying to find a way that somebody can do the women's work, but you gotta have the money. He's got the money, and
Right.
but you're doing the same work, but you're not making money. How do you figure that out? And I think about this a great deal, and I have not come up with a great solution. But in today's world, you have to have money. And if you're just going to trust that the other person is always going to provide plenty of money, you are not in a good position. And that's what the trad wife people really get wrong because some of these women who actually have like made all this content, things do go wrong. And then there they are. There they are, and they're not in a good place. And
I mean, we've actually talked about this before.
yeah,
The fact of this generation of trad wives, they're actually often the primary earners, right? Because they're actually monetizing all
oh, the
kinds of
successful
things.
ones.
They're
Yeah.
making, they're monetizing and influencing and out there making a lot of money from the visualization of their lifestyle. So it's a little
Although
bit different than an actual trad wife who is not monetizing all of her lifestyle.
And probably some of it for probably for every trad wife who I have never watched any of this content, but I have heard the name Ballerina Farm. I know that
Yes.
exists. For every person like her, there's probably 100 more. They're like, this is how I make my sourdough bread, but they're not making more than just a pittance now and then.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, the whole right, if you like you said, if you kind of go back through this idea of separate spheres, and I mean, it really sort of hit its stride during industrialization and the separate spheres idea, and all of the theorists and men who started talking about it because men were going out and earning wages, like you said, and all of a sudden there was this idea that women should be staying at home, and of course, it's always very class based too, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
there's always been women. Who work, right? There are, not to say that they haven't done gendered types of work, but there've always been women who are out there working and doing things just because that's what sort of like the economy of their family demands, and they can't stay at home. So the whole idea of a trad wife is very, very class based in the first place. And so when we talk about, right, we talk about the separate sphere and we talk about the women not working, it's middle class and upper class women. And then it's a whole different thing with upper class women who've always, like you said, outsourced the work.
Mhm.
And so there's an outsourcing of all of the childcare and the household care and all of those things, which makes it look a lot different too. Um,
I see a comment. I'm able to see comments now.
yeah, so as a man and Michael again, as a man in a marriage where my wife is a stay-at-home mom, I just wanted to say your perspectives are fascinating. I would love to hear more about that actually.
Yeah.
But
Fascinating how.
yeah, I
Well,
mean, I guess that's interesting.
I'd love
So
to report back.
so one of the things we just talked about is solutions or what can be done. And we talk, which is the housewife insurance, or there's, and people do think marriage will take care of it, and marriage doesn't necessarily take care of it. I guess that was my point. So people think it's okay, like, okay, yes, I'll sacrifice some of my earning potential and I'll do this because yes, I want to get married, I want to have the children, I want to stay home. Thinking that marriage will be a safety net if they choose to get, if the marriage ends and that will work out. But it doesn't always work out in the way that people plan it to. So I guess the question is, if you didn't get married, would you actually, I mean, you'd be a lot worse off if you never got married. But if you didn't get married, would you take the time to actually create an agreement saying, this is what I want from the person? Right. Or you would be less likely to make the choice to actually forego work opportunities because you weren't married, right? You'd say, like, no, I can't do that. We're not married. So I'm not going to choose to do that. We can both like raise kids.
When I look at, like, say, Reddit, where people are talking about their home situations, I find that fascinating because you'll have women say things like, yeah, I've been living with this guy and he's got 2 kids from his first marriage and, I stay home and take care of everybody, blah, blah, blah. And then she'll say, like, but she's got something she wants in life, but he won't fund it. And everybody is just jumping on, like, get rid of him, get rid of him. But honestly, you wonder, why is a woman with a man and doing all of taking care of his home? If she isn't married to him, she's not going to inherit the house unless he specifically, put her on the deed or something. If he breaks up with her, these children that she has grown to presumably love could be taken out of her life. And I've seen that happen. That's a cruel thing to do to the child and to the woman who's been serving as the stepmom, if there is a bond there. And, so if not marriage, you should at least have some kind of contract, I
Some type
think.
of contract, yeah. So Michael says, I agree there needs to be more equitable distributions and frameworks for spouses. And I guess some of that would be, right, I mean, there have been multiple people who've written about this, but talking with your spouses and how you allocate work. And, even when both spouses work, Arlie Hochschild wrote about the second shift. And so women come home and they work right the second shift and do the housework even though they're also working. And so it's, that also is an unfair construct. So one thing, right, I mean, like, I don't think we're going to have housewife insurance anytime soon, but talking with the spouse and dividing things up equally. I
Well,
know there was a, this famous, I
the
guess,
famous card game.
no, it's when there's like Michelle Obama tells a story about when she asked, like, she decided not to do all the things that she did on a daily basis. And so Barack Obama did them and he wrote them down, everything that she did. And at the end of the week, he was, exhausted. And he was like, I can't believe like how much you actually do, and he had just sort of thought, It was just little things, right? But that they added up. It
Oh,
was
there's
remember
a
to buy a birthday gift for a party and remembering to send in the note for the field trip, and just all of them seemed like little things, but, at the end of the week, they really added up to a huge amount of labor, and
there's a
he was shocked by how much labor it actually was. And so they
there's a
tried to
great
write
story.
how they worked in the household together.
There's a great story that this is probably apocryphal, but it's a great story that a man came home and asked his wife, "What do you do all day anyway? I'm working. I see some dishes aren't done, and this one's hair needs to be combed or whatever. What do you do all day anyway?" So the next night, this man comes home from work, and he's alarmed because he sees like the kids are just like running riot. There's things are broken, things are messy. There's food spilled everywhere. The kids are like feral, running around in their night clothes still. And he's like, "Oh my god, what has happened?" And he goes upstairs, and there's his wife. She's sitting in bed reading a book very calmly, still in her nightgown, just relaxing. She's maybe got a little, drink with there, and she's just having a high old time. He's like, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Well, you know how you ask, what do I do all day? Today I didn't do it."
Right, there you go. So there's another that's another actually, like, that's another interesting option is the strike, right? And I was remembering, I think in Iceland, they went on women went on strike. In, like,
Yeah,
2023, Iceland, they went on strike to basically show for a day, like, these are all the things that we do, and these are all the things that we do that are unpaid. And, of course, the results are remarkable in terms of what people notice. I don't know if the results were equally remarkable in terms of actually providing a solution, but, it's the now you see, right, what it was visible before, because not only is it unpaid, but a lot of times it's invisible labor.
yeah, like, and I'm guilty even of sometimes thinking like, "Why didn't I get more done today?" But if I start thinking about it, sometimes that's a lot of little things. I mean, like, things that aren't even worth mentioning, like, how long did it take me to actually pick up a coffee cup and carry it to the kitchen? How long did it take me to shelve a book? Or
Yeah.
I'm not talking about big projects, just little things you
Yeah.
do. And again, like you say, the things like remembering to deal with a family member that needs to be checked in on or something like that. I realized the other day that I am the family communicator, and God knows I'm not well suited for that role, but uh, I end up my older dad, who really is not much of he group texts, he doesn't understand group text, so we learn, do not try to get him involved in a group text. He'll become angry because he thinks he doesn't understand. So he has to be contacted separately by somebody if there's a gathering being planned. I There's no chance at all he's gonna watch this live. I'll tell you that. So, I
It's too
realized
much like a group chat, a group chat.
yeah, I realized that I would say to my daughter, she has a new house, we wanted to come see it. I said, and my dad was gonna make the drive, along with his wife from it was a long drive. They're gonna make it a 2-day trip to go. So I was trying to coordinate, well, for one, make sure that my daughter's family didn't have COVID because they had it recently and they had colds. My dad wanted to make sure that it wasn't a COVID relapse. That's fair. That's good. So, like, but of course, my dad would not call my daughter and say, "Can you test and make sure?" He contacts me. I contact my daughter. "Can you guys test for COVID?"
Mhm.
Uh,
Right.
I communicate between my daughter and my husband, my dad and and even my I don't know why my husband does this. He's a good guy. I'm not gonna paint him with a bad brush, but he will say things to me, um, "Can you ask our friend Kay,
Mhm.
he and his wife wanna come over?" And I'll say, you could text him and you'll say,
Yeah,
"I don't have his number." I will once again
you're
send him
welcome.
his number,
Yeah.
but the next time comes like, "Oh, I don't have his number." I'm like, "If I drop dead, you'll never be able to talk to anybody ever again because you just expect me to keep track of how to reach everybody and
Yeah.
to, like, he'll say, "Can you invite somebody over?" But even though
That's
I've
one of
sent
the things,
out
yeah, I think that's one of the things that's pretty typical, right, in terms of women doing the social organizing. Michael said, "I work from home. I see firsthand my wife works harder than I do by wrangling our toddler." I think it was actually an interesting moment for people during COVID when people were all working, or not all people, but a lot of people were working at home, and it was very clear again, like, the invisible labor what became very clear, and people from work who work from home, I think, do have a better sense of exactly what happens during a day and all of the work that goes into it. I think you're right, like, I think that women do get, sort of tagged as the communicator, and, like the one who's in charge of sending the cards and making the social plans and doing those type of things. I'm interested if anybody feels like sharing in the chat also, like, what's the one type of unpaid or invisible labor you do that, like, annoys you the most? Because sometimes it's something like that, right? It's like, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it actually just ends up being annoying, like, "Why do I have to text them and invite them for dinner?" Like, "You have a
They
phone,
both have phones.
right? Like, you have a phone too, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I was trying to think about the forms of labor that I do, and again, like, I most things I do for myself, so I feel pretty, I have no one to blame but myself when they don't get done properly, and I try to outsource a lot most of my things. But there are certain things again in terms of like you'd have everyone has still has care responsibilities with parents or with other people in the family. And so there are still things and so when my mom says, "Oh, would you send this to a family member or do this?" or and the fact that you're like, "Okay, I'll do it." I mean, even if there's things that you like doing, right? Like it still takes time, and so like the tending to relationships with parents, like you said, it takes time, and it's just a
That is really the rub, is that a lot of what people who are caregivers or community involvement, a lot of things that people do, it's because they actually really do wanna do them.
yeah.
Like this lady I mentioned who's, really involved in the community, and as she gets some recognition for it, but she just does so many different things.
Mhm.
And, why does she do them? She enjoys them, honestly.
Wisdom, yeah.
That's part of her social life. She shows
Yeah.
up at a meeting, she helps make plans, she takes care of organizing events and things like that, she runs programs. Uh, Honestly, if our schools did a better job, she would not be
Mhm.
having programs in the public housing to help
Yeah,
disadvantaged kids read. I mean, that's one of the she does a lot of stuff like that. That's really valuable. She
yeah,
doesn't cares and she wants to,
yeah,
but that should be paid work.
right, and this is one of the
It
other
needs to be
things
done.
interesting is that women oftentimes and I was reading about this, there was a study, recently, it was from Northwestern Mutual, but it was about elder care, and it was about how daughters end up doing more care than sons do for their parents, and they were talking about the competence trap
Mhm.
and the problem and it's I think this happens with housework and gatekeeping too, right? Like, the daughters end up doing it because they're competent, right? They're like, "I know how to do this, it's fine, let me just do it. It takes me less time than for you to figure out how to do it," and, so there's a penalty for sort of the competence, and this is actually, I think, does fall on single people more than married people because, if your siblings are married, they'll say, "Well, you're single, you can do it, you have all the time in the world." Right? So you're sort of penalized for that. Or if you happen to be the one who's good at, like you said, communicating or all of these things, there's a penalty for being framed as competent, or it's an excuse that people use to make you do something like you're the competent one. And it happens too. Again, I think it's a gatekeeping thing, but I think with housework, a lot of times, and gendering it with men will say like, "Oh, I don't know how to do that." Right? Like, I don't, or I don't load the dishwasher the way you like it to be loaded. Something like that.
Well, I mean, it's a well-known fact that in order to do laundry, you have to have a vagina, and that's just a biological fact.
Just, I mean, it's funny. Yeah, it certainly seems to help, to know where to put in the detergent, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I found out recently my husband, who actually does do laundry, that he did not realize oh god, I shouldn't tell this. He did not realize that when we got the new washing machine about a year or 2 ago, that it has the little pull-out tray that you load up with, detergent and if you want to, the liquid laundry detergent or, water fabric softener. He
Mhm.
wasn't aware that he's just been the old one, you didn't have that, we just dumped it in, so he was quite shocked when he happened to be in the basement when I was loading it up, he's like, "Huh, he didn't know that existed."
Mm. So again, right? Like it's like the competence thing, and I mean, competence can be the idea of competence can be weaponized, right, against
Mhm.
women, or the idea that somebody likes something done a particular way, that type of gatekeeping can be weaponized against women. I'm just curious. CM said, definitely the communicator role. Yeah, I stopped sending cards, organizing the get togethers. He stepped after that, but it took my stopping for that to happen. Um, I had assumed the role unthinkingly since I had inherited that framework. I think it is one of the things that's feminized, right? And of course, like there's a lot of domestic labor that's masculinized too, right? Like, oh,
Mm,
I'll
yeah.
take the trash, or I'll do take care of the lawn, whatever it is, right? There are things that are masculinized. Um, Thanks, Michael. Michael says I have to depart. But thanks for dropping by. So there are things that are masculinized, just not as many, right? Just not
Oh,
many, and things that don't take as much time, and they are not quite the same.
I've often, yeah. Well, in the case of my husband and me, we bought this fixer upper. This is a really old house, 1897. And we bought it realizing that it was going to need a lot of work. And we bought it in 2008. And we have only, I mean, we've actually done a lot, but there's a lot involved in taking an old house and restoring it. And it was more than we bit off more than we could chew. But
Mhm.
my husband, he works full time away from home,
Mhm.
pretty long hours. And we have been living I should just pick up the phone and show you my hallway, but I'd be embarrassed to because we tripped off this ancient many layers of ancient wallpaper like 2 years ago,
Mhm.
and we are still going around with this wall just looking it looks like you're walking into a crack den or something. I mean, it just looks terrible, and it's just a matter of it's old plaster, so it's not as easy as if it were a newer house to get all the wallpaper off and
Mhm.
fix all the little cracks and things and put up either paint or wallpaper. It's not an over it's something that we have the skills to do,
Mhm.
but the time because that's not just that project, there's a million projects at my house,
Right.
and ideally, we would hire some of them done, but we have hired almost none of them done. Most of them we've done ourselves. When I say we, I generally mean my husband. So I have to give him credit. You know, he has done a lot of hands-on carpentry type things because he has those skills. When he was very young, he worked for a relative doing kitchen bathroom remodels back in Holland. So he already knows how.
Right.
He's much stronger than I am. He has a talent, and it's not that I can't help a little bit. Like I can help hold up a board or
Right.
whatever, but I'm not going to be able to take over that project. And even if he didn't exist, I wouldn't take it over. I would not have bought this house as a single woman
Mhm.
with my low level of skills and rather puny strength. So more power to any woman who can
Yeah,
work
so
really
so
hard
those
and
are
work.
things, right? There are things around the house that, things that are coded masculine in terms of, in terms of work, but it's generally not the care work ever,
No,
right? It's not the
no,
care work. Now, when you were married and you were raising your children, did you have an agreement, explicit or implicit, about who was going to do what?
not at all. As a matter of fact, I thought I would continue on to work. It didn't really occur to me that I would stay home, and I ended up going back to work part time,
Mhm.
but still not really happy with that. It got to the point where like every day when I was time to leave my daughter and go into the office, I just did not want to go. So when she was 11 months old, I quit the part time job, and part of it I could do from home a little bit,
Yeah.
and part of it I could do with her in the office after hours with her sleeping next to my desk. But the older she got, the less of that you could do. You can hold a baby in your arms and type, but you can't
Mhm.
chase a toddler and type. So, and many, many, many times I was actually doing an interview at home at my kitchen table with the baby
Mhm.
latched on nursing and me thinking, please don't pull off and make any slurpy noises because I am talking to the mayor.
Yeah.
I mean, I did all kinds of like chances like that. Eventually, I just didn't want to do it anymore, and I quit. And I did a limited amount of freelancing just to kind of keep a hand in and everything. But it was a fairly, it wasn't something we'd planned for. So had we planned for it, it would have,
Just talk about, like, "I'm gonna work for this long," or "You're gonna do these
yeah,
things." Yeah.
yeah,
It's
we
interesting.
did not have that
There's
discussion
all
at all.
these templates for people sitting down and talking within a household and, like, first of all, taking an inventory of all the things that get done, right? So,
Mhm.
like, from making dinner to picking up dry cleaning or taking the car in or all of those different things, and then basically trying to allocate them 50-50. I have a friend who does that with her spouse, like, every year. They to sit down and they look at all the things that, that they do on a daily or weekly basis. Then they try to basically divide them out, and she tries to assign them to each one of them, or, tries to, like, work it out so that they do it sort of against gender stereotypes, so that
Mhm.
they do. And she's in a different sex marriage, but she tries to assign them in ways such that, she's doing the things that would be coded male, and he's doing the things that would be coded female. And, like, he does most of the cooking. They split the, taking the kids, walking them to school, stuff like that. But they really, I mean, they put a lot of time into taking this, doing this worksheet and this inventory. And it's a one way to again make visible. There's certainly, again, the burden of the unpaid labor is being shared, which is the problem again, right? Because we all do unpaid labor. It's when the burden of that falls on one person, and so they're sharing it.
I think this goes along with traditional female work, like teaching, nursing, and, you know, teaching used to pay worse than it does, but when it was all women, it was okay to not pay that well.
Mm,
But, this is gonna vary according to what state you live in, but I was married to a teacher for 15 years,
yeah.
so my ex was a teacher, so I watched, you know, his income through the years. And it wasn't very much the first few years, but
Mhm.
actually right about the time the marriage ended, his pay was becoming really nice, and he was
Yeah.
able to cover or excuse me, to retire with a really quite decent, amount of money. He was making good money the last however many years of teaching and was able to retire early. And, that's not true. This is Illinois. Illinois does pay their teachers. If you're living in Missouri or for someplace like that, it is a completely different story. But in some states, a teacher now makes pretty good money. Nurses generally make good money, but I think I've seen studies saying that they started paying more when men started doing that kind of work.
Sure, right? Like, once men start taking over and I mean, you have occupational segregation to start with, and
Yeah.
then once they hit a certain number, right? But this is one of the problems with I mean, again, it would never happen, but actual compensation for domestic labor, unpaid labor, if you tried to do fair wages, care work is so underpaid, right? It's, like, so undervalued because it's feminized as an occupation that you need to fix that first in order to have actually fair wages being paid for people who do care work in the home, so, I mean, you look at who does care work, it's primarily obviously women. It's actually, high percentage of, women of color, and they're being paid such small amounts for the important work they're doing.
We don't value that work, even though the people who are taking care of children at a daycare center, like, how can we not consider that vital work?
Right. So that's the problem, right? We can't say let's pay them a fair wage because the fair wage we don't actually have a fair wage for any type of care work. And
No.
one of the problems is all of those types of works, that have been feminized and that have been occupationally segregated into female spaces is that people and most particularly unpaid labor people will always say, well, they did it because they wanted to and they love it when it's a labor of love, right? Like raising your children, it's a labor of love, and I'm sure it is. I'm sure people like their children, right? And I'm sure people like raising their children at least 50% of the time. um, but it is not just a labor of love, it is actually labor. And to sort of mask it as just I just did it because I just love to do it. It's not a hobby, right? It's actual labor. It's something that needs to do you're producing a public good, which is, children and citizens, and it's not just like playing tennis, right?
No, but doesn't it seem interesting to you that so many different types of jobs that are low paid end up being filled by women? And, I came, of course,
But
from
I
the
don't think
tourism
I think
world.
it's the other way around. They're low paid because they are filled by women, right? Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
not a coincidence. If they were filled by men, they would be high paid, just like if men bought tampons, they would be very cheap, right? Like
When I worked as a newspaper editor, um, you know, I was poorly paid, and the people who I supervised were even more poorly paid, and the newsroom was pretty predominantly female. I mean, I had men too, but, there were an awful lot of us who were women, and that wasn't, an accident, and it wasn't on purpose. I tried to keep things as diverse, I mean, to a fault. I really, had as diverse a staff as it was possible to have.
mhm,
But if you're a man supporting a family, you're not gonna take a job making $18,000 a year.
mhm,
I mean, a couple of them did, but, basically, this was a job that a married woman would have, or someone who's fairly young and still living with their parents would have, or at least would have a roommate. And I'm thinking like one person on staff. He was our full-time photographer. He also did pyrotechnics on the side. He also was a paramedic on the weekend. And he
right.
also played in a band, and he also ran an open mic. And he also had some work in Chicago. He actually had a recurring part on a couple of, TV shows that were based in Chicago.
Okay.
I mean, this guy was busy.
Yeah.
It's because we didn't pay him.
Right? I mean, it makes me think, and, obviously people don't say it out loud anymore, but the idea of the family wage, right? And that,
Yeah.
it used to be that men got a higher that the gender pay gap, right, was justified because men needed more money because they were supporting an entire family, and so they would get paid more than women. And, we don't say it anymore. We don't say, although I think actually some politicians have, to be clear, because they wanna bring back all kinds of 1950s, like, work and, gender politics. So we don't usually say things about the family wage anymore, but it's still kind of implicit, right? That men who are uh, funding, taking care of a family and paying, serving as the primary and if maybe only breadwinner need more money.
They did not give me a raise when my first marriage ended. They did not say, "Oh, now you're single and, in charge of this household, you've got 2 kids. We're gonna pay you a man's wage."
You didn't get a family wage?
It did not happen, huh?
Yeah. So there's that. Yeah. Um, And so we've talked about childcare and we've talked about elder care. And I just wanted to point out that there's a whole lot being talked about and written about now, also about the sandwich generation and people who are doing both, and the fact that there are a lot of women who are 40s and 50s who are still doing things for still either have young children or are still working with children and also doing elder care, right?
Well, the thing is, I look at my dad, my mother passed away fairly young, but, he's been remarried for many years. His wife is 70, I think she's 75 years old. She
Hmm.
is spending literally half of her time, along with her sister at the other half, caring for her mother who is 99 years old.
Hmm.
And it's not easy care, I mean, I've never taken care of a 99-year-old, but this is someone who can't be left alone and needs quite a bit of care, hands-on physical care, and 2 ladies in their 70s are providing all this care.
Hmm.
That means my dad, who's 80, is living by himself, and there isn't a "why don't they just" solution to this because the 99-year-old does require care,
Hmm.
and who else is gonna do it? There aren't any other family members that live close enough,
Right.
like younger family members, like, this is just her reality, and it has been for years that she literally, like, will spend half the week about an hour away, not sure about that, but roughly an hour away from home, providing
Mhm,
total care to her mother, and then she goes back home, and her sister comes in and stays. That is they don't have any other siblings or anything like that. I mean,
mm.
I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think the answer should be that somebody in their 70s is doing that level of care because it's exhausting.
Yeah, I was like, this is the same study I'd mentioned before. It says women age 45 to 64 are the most likely to provide care, balancing it with employment and childcare. It says for a growing number of women, the caregiving load does not stop at one generation. According to this study, 47% of caregivers under the age of 50 are simultaneously raising children under 18 while caring for an adult family member or friend. And it says Black and Latina caregivers are disproportionately represented in the sandwich generation.
I can't even imagine that.
So that's a lot
Yeah.
of
Well,
care work happening
one
then.
thing
Labor.
I mentioned that my mother had passed away. She had cancer, so anybody who's cared for somebody with cancer knows what that was, and I was living, um, 2.5 hours away probably. So we visited on the weekend, but my sister lived basically, like, down the block.
Mm,
And so what my dad did, because he needed to keep his job, he paid my sister to do this. And some people might wonder, like, "Why did you have to pay your daughter to?" Because my sister needed a job. And so why would my dad choose to pay a stranger to take care of our mother when my sister was happy to quit her regular paid job
mm,
and get paid instead by my dad? That way, my mom had good care, and my sister was, of course,
mhm,
not happy to do it, but she would have rather done it than had somebody, that we didn't know. So, I mean, that worked out well all around. So that was, I thought, an appropriate decision. I could not have done it because I lived too far away and I had little kids. But
mhm,
my sister was able to just bring her young child with her a
mhm.
block away
Yeah,
and be there all day long while my dad was at work. And but she wasn't expected to forego income 'cause she needed income.
right.
Dad was gonna pay somebody, so it just made sense.
Sure.
So
That's a good, yeah. 'Cause one of the things that's interesting is, people always state a preference for being cared for or having their family members cared for by somebody in the family. And I think that's not always helpful. I think people need to accept or people need to think about care in a different way and that people need to embrace childcare, right? Like daycare or other forms of elder care where you're not being taken care of by the family. Family's not always the best person to take care of you, but people state that preference all the time. And I think it reinforces, I mean, there's obviously good things to it, but it also reinforces these notions that that's the only person who can take care of you. And it reinforces these patterns of unpaid labor. And again, like disproportionate sort of burdens of unpaid labor when we think that, we're the only people who can provide care for a family member.
Well, I will say, and this was back in 1997, so a lot has hopefully changed, but the hospice worker that would come to my dad's home, he had
Mhm.
a hospital bed in the living room, this is the setup they had. Um, Many hospice workers are wonderful angel-like
Yeah.
people. The one that, they had, and the insurance gave my dad a choice of putting my mom in, like a nursing home type of hospice that was so far away that he would have had to either quit his job or not see her for very long, or to do it at home and have just, like, someone come by a couple of times a week, so that he chose that possibility, 'cause otherwise he would not have been there for her final illness, or he would have had to quit his job, which wasn't an option. So he didn't have good options to choose from in the first place. But nobody in my family is a nurse or has any medical training whatsoever. None of us do. And when at a certain point, a friend of mine had a sister who had worked in nursing homes and really did understand the stuff. She was happy to come and like show us some things.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into all the details, but we all cried because we realized that things that we just in our ignorance did not realize
Mhm.
had caused pain for my mother.
Right.
We did not know. We didn't know how if someone's got broken bones because they've got, cancer in their bones at this point, we
Mhm.
didn't know that there is a method of, like, changing the bed that is
Right.
far less painful. We didn't know there's a lot we didn't know. We didn't know. We did not know.
I mean, it goes to point and just it goes to prove, point out that goes to highlight that these are actually skills, right?
Profession. Yeah,
Professions, people who know what they're doing, and it's important to sort of value the care that the people who are doing it professionally bring, and the fact that they have expertise in doing these things, and they should be rewarded for that.
yeah, it was not unskilled care. I
Yeah.
mean, showed us in a few hours, and we realized that it made us feel really bad. We wished we had known better, but how would we? We're not trained, and,
No. And no one should be not everyone should be expected to know all these things. I think it's the idea that when we need to a lot of things when we need to know how to do them, we go to somebody who's expert in them, but care is
yeah,
not always one of them, and it's a too bad because it's something where we could benefit from having people paying people appropriately, number 1, as we said, but also going to people and relying on their expertise.
yeah.
So
So
one of the things well, just so kind of how we're coming to an end, we've kind of talked a little bit about solutions, but I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on like collective forms of care. So we talked about I always think like, we need to sort of redefine what the family is and think about care networks in bigger ways than the family, like we were just talking about. And there's paid professional care. But ways to think about the care of family members outside of the family and building these collectives, whether it's with daycare or elder care or even just like living, right? Like, how do we think about doing that collectively? I don't know.
I
Any
would absolutely love to have if I had unlimited money, if I won some huge lottery or something, it's money fell in my lap. My whole family knows I wanna do this. I would buy a compound. I would have multiple houses, like, in a ring.
Mhm,
We would have, you know, we'd have a collective lawn with a collective pool and a collective garden and orchard and all this stuff,
mhm.
and a collective fire pit, and, like, we I've got this all planned out, believe me. This is
Yeah.
no chance of happening, but my son would have his house, my daughter and her family would have a house. We'd have some sort of like a little guest cottage or something like that, and we would all have our own space, but when we wanted to get together, there would be space that I could cook a because this is my thing personally. I
Mhm,
could cook a great big meal and have everybody coming
mhm,
together, but they probably, as much as I'd like to think they'd wanna do that every day, I know that my son would have, a fairly low tolerance for that. He would rather be in his own house. So
mhm.
he would, you control how much time you have. The New York Times had a story. I you'd have to Google for it. It was some woman who found some land out in the country, and it's a bunch of single women.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, that was a great
did you read
article.
that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, but nothing against men. Some of them date men, but they don't.
That
You
was
know,
a fan I mean, it sounded like a great it's actually I had so many people send that to me because they were like, "This sounds like heaven." It's just like a bunch of women sitting around, like, reading, and there's cats, and there's, like, food, and, like, books, and I mean, it sounded magical.
I wish my house is fairly big, but it's one of those like goofy old Victorians where it's like if you could collect all the bits of wasted space, you could have more usable space. 'Cause
Mhm.
I would absolutely freaking love to have um, all kinds of weekends, like writers' weekends, or
Mhm.
I mean, I actually, because I enjoy a lot of the traditional feminine things. I just do. Like, I would love to, like, come over and let's bake bread. We'll make cheese. We'll make butter. I mean, to me, that's a good time. That's
Mhm.
may not be your idea of a good time, but I would love it. I would love to have people come over and we'd like read each other's work
Yeah.
and things like that. We do have, my husband has a recording studio in our attic, and musicians come over, and I'm unfortunately completely not talented musically whatsoever, which is really too bad because um, it would be nice if we could share that. But I have a tin ear, so I'm like, sure, it sounds good, but it sounded good to me before you processed this music. I can't really tell the difference. But he does have like all these musicians coming over and collaborating together, and like that's his version of all this stuff, and he has some of that. Because I really do feel like people depend too much on their actual family, blood
Mhm.
family, and I mean, I love that, but there are other people in the world
Mhm.
too. It's good
Yep.
to talk to other people in the world and
Yeah.
interact with them, and it strikes me as how weird it would probably seem to people if you in history that, like, how many houses in your neighborhood have you been inside? I
Right.
mean, I've been in my neighbors on this side, and I have once, under previous owners, been just barely inside the door of the other house. The house over here and over here, nope, never been there.
It would also strike people historically as odd that we define, right, that the nuclear family is so predominant, and that's our unique way of understanding the family as opposed to, multiple generations and people who are not within your nuclear family, but that we really restrict it to that when we think of what family is. And I think that is also sort of would be historically baffling to people. And it's one of the reasons, right, that we have formed this insistence on, at least legally speaking, but I think also culturally, on the nuclear family that we have a hard time thinking in collectives. We've done everything we can to promote this nuclear family, right? We've zoned for it. We've, created inheritance laws around it. We've created entire legal systems around it, which make it hard for us to think in collectives.
I think that as much as I value my individuality, I think that we have really put too much on individuals and also nuclear families, and are not enough on, well, some cultures have more of like a kinship. Like, you have all these cousins and aunts and uncles, and you all
Mhm.
really do are up in each other's business in a way that I think has both pros and cons.
Mhm.
But like as far as like your neighbors, the people down the street, a lot of people do not know any of their neighbors, which growing up, I knew at least somewhat knew all of our neighbors, but
Mhm.
I probably know more neighbors than most people do just because I'm out walking my dogs
Yeah.
and end up talking to people. But I'm always surprised by people who really know their neighbors. Like most people I talk to say that they do not know their neighbors. They may not even know their names.
Yeah.
They might not even know, like, is it a man, a woman, a couple, a family? And like unless they see kids out in the yard, sometimes it's like, especially in an old neighborhood or not an old neighborhood, in a neighborhood where people pull into their garage and put down the garage door, like, who lives in that house?
Mm.
There's no telling.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I do know my neighbors, but I try to avoid them, but I'll be honest.
I am better off with my neighbors that I'm no longer the editor of the local newspaper because
Uh,
at some point
yeah.
at some point when I was the editor of the newspaper, I had some kind of unfortunate run through with almost everybody around because something in their family made the newspaper in a way that they were unhappy with.
Yeah. I One of my neighbors is my dentist, so I do know him. But, I mean, I do take your point, right? The neighbor like, your neighbors are one form of collectives, we have a lot of forms of collectivity that we just don't think about, and it is nice to be able to call on your neighbor if you need something, right? If you need I mean, if you need protection in this day and age, right? Like, in terms of who's that, who's coming to your door and who's in your neighborhood and knowing people and protecting them, seems that, yeah, I knew my neighbor when my children were young. After that, it was harder. Yeah, I don't think there are any children around. I mean, it's not a child neighborhood. But people sit out, like, on the porches type of thing, and we have an arts walk every 3 months or something, and people
A what walk?
it's called, like, an arts walk, so they have every, like, vendors are on, like, every block, and they have, like, little bands and food
Oh,
trucks and
okay.
stuff. So,
Well,
like
that's actually really good. That's
yeah,
really
so, like,
good.
those kind of collective things are nice, and again, I think it is good to know who your neighbors are.
Mhm.
I don't really, like, spend a lot of time with them, but I do bake a lot, so I do drop off, like, baked goods on their doors, like,
Well
doorstep, leave them because it is nice to know who they are and to be able to call on people if you need
well,
something.
you think about I've got my husband, but my next door neighbor, is a few years older than me, and she's single. When her sister passed away, there was also actually, the very night her sister passed away, there was a really terrible storm, trees went down.
Mm,
We found some glass in our yard, and we're like, "Oh, it looked like it came from our house." We like, "Well, we can't find any broken windows." My house has about 3,000 windows. And, we finally, like, it had to have been blown in from someplace else. We start looking around and we realize it's the attic window of our next door neighbor, and we knew her sister had just passed away. So, we went over there and said, God knows when she would have noticed it. Like, we think that your attic window is broken, and, you know, the attic was tough to access. It was like in an area where my husband had to kinda crawl. So he was able to go up there and do like a makeshift repair. He's not I'm not trying to give him credit as being some sort of hero, but, he did do it, and she could not have done this for herself. I think it would have been impossible for her to have gotten into the space he got and to repair this window enough so that to keep out animals and rain and wind and everything. And if we didn't know her and she didn't know us, then that wouldn't either it wouldn't have happened or it would have been really super awkward.
right. Super
It's always little things like that.
right. That's true. Okay, so well, we're coming up at time, so I want to wrap things up for us. But tell me, so I know one form of unpaid labor that's annoying, doing the communicating and making the plans with everybody. What's one type of unpaid labor that you like to do?
I really like to do all the cooking, and, my husband likes it that I do all the cooking, and earlier in our marriage, he was willing to help, and to be honest, I I'd rather eat my cooking.
See?
So, that works out just fine. I am home all day writing. I can dash downstairs to take something out of the freezer if I need to, you know? It's not ideal in some ways to work at home. I do prefer it, but it also means that I get interrupted an awful lot. Partly it's because I chose to adopt older dogs.
Mhm.
The one is quite elderly and she needs a lot of hands-on care.
Yeah.
And it seems like I will just feel like I know what I'm doing. Like, I know how to write that sentence. And I hear the old dog is trying to get up, and I've got to pick her up, take her outside. And like, but I chose to adopt an elderly dog, and even if I'd adopted a puppy, they get elderly eventually. I can't be too upset because this was my choice, but I spend an awful lot of time taking care of elderly dogs and cleaning up messes that are connected with having an elderly dog,
Yeah.
and it
We
was my
didn't talk
choice.
about pet care. We talked about child care and elder care. We didn't even talk about pet care. We got Bertram's right here. Hi.
Yeah, you have 3 kitty cats?
I had 2.
2 cats,
Yeah.
and I've got 2 dogs, and they're older, and anytime we wanna leave for a longer period of time, it's not easy to leave your dog.
Yeah.
We're always trying to find a way to make her work better. We have not found any perfect solutions. It's complicated because the dog has complicated needs.
Yeah.
So, we
Okay,
made this
so
choice.
pet care and cooking are the 2 things that you like. Sam says, "I like to garden." That's a nice form of unpaid labor. I like to look at gardens, and mowing the lawn. Oh, that's a good one.
I don't enjoy
My
mowing the
favorite form
lawn.
of unpaid I mean, there's a lot of things that I like doing. I like cooking as well and baking, but one of the things that is that I enjoy doing that is something that is not, like, just for me, like the cooking. I like writing thank you notes.
You do, really?
I do, because I like stationery and I like picking out cards and, like, I still actually send cards, and so, like, I enjoy it. I have, like, all these various forms of, like, personalized stationery, and I really like them. So like, I like cooking, I like baking, and I like the things that I like that I can enjoy myself, in gift giving, but actually, yeah, I enjoy writing thank you notes. It's very weird because I spent years resisting when my mom was like, "Write a thank you note to your uncle," and I was like, "Ugh." But now I've actually I've bought into it and I enjoy doing it.
You know what? I think we should all do more of that because, yeah, somewhere in this room, probably, I've got an old file of thank you notes from all different stages of life, from when I was working with young nursing moms who were struggling with
Yeah.
their babies, women who were thanking me for, what they felt was helpful to them,
Mhm.
to when I was working at the newspaper, different things that people wrote
Yeah.
because of my involvement with some story that they found meaningful, like a woman who lost her
Mm.
child. And she really people demonized the press, but I sat down and we went through her scrapbooks together and stuff like that.
Mhm.
She sent me a thank you note. Um,
Mhm.
different politicians who sent me thank you notes or whatever, things like that, just because they thought, that we'd done a good job, I guess, or something. But I've got like a whole file of those somewhere. And
Yeah.
um,
I like I like
I remember a lot of them 20, 30, 40 years later. I remember some of those thank you notes. I think people really appreciate those.
Yeah. No, it's nice. I get thank you notes from students, most semesters, and they're always just nice. I mean, it is nice to get a thank you note. It's also better to get paid, but it is nice to get a thank you note. So,
It's nice to have acknowledgement.
it is nice.
And that acknowledgement can be paid or unpaid, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's appropriate for one, sometimes for another, but yeah.
Yeah.
I'm probably not as I probably need to step up the cards. I finally had to give up on Christmas cards. I
Yeah.
just every year I'd mean to somewhere in this house are probably 30 boxes of Christmas cards that I had good intentions and never got around to sending.
Right. I mean, it's actually interesting. It's probably a good note to end on that the fact of acknowledgement is also a big thing, right? When we talk about all this unpaid labor that people do and care, whether it's for children, pets, parents, whatever, whoever you're caring for, neighbors, friends, anyone, who is important to you that you're caring for. Obviously, part of it is fair compensation for disproportionate burden, but part of it's also acknowledgement.
One thing my
The
husband does
acknowledgement and the thanking and sort of the circulation of care means uh, you know, being able to recognize what people do for you, because I think that also makes people more likely to be reciprocal.
One of the things my husband really does right, and any man who is here today should write this down and do this, is that anytime I thank him for doing like a pretty major physical job, like remodeling a room or fixing something that's broken in the house or something like that, installing a new water heater recently, all that kind of thing. Anytime I'm like, thank you, because that saved us a lot of money. If we had
Mhm.
to hire a plumber, it would have cost us $1,000, whatever.
Right.
And so, probably more. And so every time I say something like that, he almost always will say, but I can only do all this stuff because you're taking care of other things. You're
Right.
making the food and you're holding down all these other household things. Because he said, if I had to do all that,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had time. And
Yeah,
so he really does see it.
and I think that's really, like I think that is, I think that's important because we've talked about how not only is some of a lot of labor unpaid, but a lot of it's also invisible. So
Yeah.
there's the
But
paying and
notice
making it visible or also making it recognizable to people. And so people can, again,
notice what people are doing. And I mean, that's true at home, but like, also one of my old bosses said that, she would always be surprised when somebody left, that she would, realize something wasn't done and she'd say, "Oh, that person took care of that."
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, there's
You learn
lots
all the things that people do when they leave. And so maybe a good idea is to try to recognize what they do before that happens. But whether it's in a home, whether it's in a workplace, whether it's in a friendship,
a
right? It's just
volunteer
for
organization.
the things that people do, recognizing people for it,
Mhm.
thanking them for it, and then thinking of ways to reciprocate. I think that's obviously that's not, a substitute for sort of large scale policies, but it's a really good sort of, you know, it's a good place to start and it's a good ethics to start with.
I would not want to live in a society in which every single thing was paid labor. Like, hey, I just nursed the baby again. Venmo me 20 bucks.
Yeah.
or, or, hey, I just unclogged the toilet. You owe me, you Venmo me, however many. I mean, if you start thinking about it, it's ridiculous. We all need to do some unpaid labor, and there will be
Yeah,
times
like, I
in
you
our
know,
life.
I'm not gonna I live by myself, and I'm not gonna, charge myself $20 for making my, like, morning coffee. So, there's a lot of, like right, we all do unpaid labor. Again, it's the disproportionate forms of it, and it's the ones that harm people that are the ones that we need to look out for.
If one person is doing all unpaid labor and depending upon somebody else's paid labor, that is not a good situation. That was the way it was for women for many generations, but I think that we've gotta get away from that. It
Yeah.
I would love to see something like housewife insurance or mother insurance.
Yeah.
There needs to be an agreement that, if you're staying home to take care of the kids for
Yeah.
which maybe you're thrilled to do. I really was thrilled to do it. I really did love it, but I should have been compensated for that
Yeah.
in some manner,
Yeah.
and, I wasn't just like many other women. Uh,
Yeah.
I just hope it becomes visible. That's the thing. It shouldn't be
Yeah,
an
visibility is good, and I would say, like, I think beyond, like, insurance or forms of compensation, I think we also have to start thinking in collectives and acting in collectives and building those collectives outside of nuclear families because I think it's not always the most productive unit to measure everything in, and it's not always the most productive, form of, like, social happiness and social it's not always the ultimate form of social meaning. So I think it's nice to think outside of that.
think about all the friends you've had that when they get married, that changes your friendship. I'm thinking about I think this is almost universal, and you probably have a different perspective because you've remained single, but, I'm thinking, like, of friends that we used to see all the time, and then they get married, and, uh, you don't see them as much anymore because instead of hanging out with friends, they're hanging out with their spouse, which
Yeah.
is fine, which is good,
It's true. Yeah, we
but
should actually I was gonna say we should have a whole 'nother one on singleness because it changes a lot. It also changes then when they have children too, that's a whole
yeah.
thing, but it definitely changes and people not only like to hang out with their spouses, but couples like to hang out with couples, right? I think I mentioned I read something the other day about how, how there's a point where you as a single person get demoted to the lunch slot, right? And all of a sudden you're good for lunch, but you're not good for dinners because that's for couples. And
Well,
it's an interesting thing. So, yeah.
I had my children relatively young, and, we have friends who, they she basically had almost finished raising her first family when she remarried and had children with, her husband who hadn't had children before. So she's, like, still in the trenches, whereas, my kids from my first marriage who are grown up and out of the house, I never have to say, "No, I can't have dinner that night because this kiddo has got, a soccer game or something." That doesn't occur in my family anymore.
Yeah.
And so it really even though I'm married and have kids, my kids are out of the house, so we function as, like, a childless couple for all practical purposes. Yeah, it really does change it, and I had friendships that did not survive people who are very, very, very busy with their kids, like, you
Mhm.
could never see them because their kids were in so many activities, and every night was a
Yeah.
child-centered, that changes the dynamic, and those people you just don't see them. Their only friends end up being the parents of their children that are involved in the same activities.
Yeah. Okay, I think we should put this on the agenda for a different time because this is a whole great topic. I could talk about it forever, and there's, really, like I think there's so much going on right now in singlehood studies too that there's so much to talk about, and, people are finally understanding, like, different ways in which it's very difficult, right? It's very
And
I mean,
love I love the
again,
fact
what
that
different ways in which, again, like, the nuclear family and the marital relationship have been weaponized in social, uh, gathering and the ways that we socialize.
and I
So
absolutely love that, we can speak from different perspectives on this since you, haven't married and haven't had children, and I have the experience of being married, having children. I have the experience of being a single mom for 4 years, and then the experience of being remarried. So that's a lot of different perspectives. Maybe
Yeah.
we should invite somebody over who's got really little kids,
Yeah. They
but
don't
that
have
person
time,
does not have
apparently. I
time.
don't know. All right. Well, thanks for taking time. And thanks everybody for coming and all of the comments. Thank you for all of that, and thanks for like helping us think about visibility and compensation.
Yeah, if you've got a great solution to the problem of caregivers, doing important work but not being able to get paid, everyone wants to hear it.
That's right. Everyone wants to hear it except for yeah, anyone who's actually currently in the federal administration. But
Oh
we would
god,
all
yeah.
hear it. Yeah. So yeah, please, let us know. That would be great.
Right. Goodbye.
All right. Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.